In this video, we will look at how to clean and prepare data for analysis. This particular tutorial is specifically about the union operation. Union combines datasets by stacking them together. Another term typically used to describe this is append. Essentially, we are putting rows or records together by stacking them vertically so that we produce a single table that has the combined rows from all sources. Think of stacking piles of paper on top of each other. For a union to work, the records we're stacking, they have to be uniform. Otherwise, if we're stacking different records together, some of the fields may not match and our results will be incorrect. I will demo the cleaning using 3 different tools: Tableau Desktop, Tableau Prep Builder, and Power Query. Ultimately, we will get similar results, but it's helpful to see how to do the cleaning process using different tools. What I've done here is I've taken a data source from the City of Vancouver Open Data Portal. This is the Parks Facilities data source. I downloaded it and adjusted it and intentionally introduced some typical characteristics we would find in real-world datasets. And these characteristics may necessitate the need to clean the data prior to analysis. If you want to follow along, I've posted the files. The download link is in the description below. I've split the original data source to 2 different files. I've also further split one of the files into 3 different tabs. In the Parks and Facilities Excel file, this is what I've done. The first one, I've introduced some rows that are not part of the data. I've also added a title. There is a second tab specifically for jogging trails, but what you can see in here is I've changed the field names. In the third tab, it's mostly the same as the first tab. However, I also did change one of the field names, so I've introduced a space in here for park ID. Now, in addition to changing the field names, what we can see is we have inconsistent field counts. For the first tab, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 columns in here. The second one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 columns. The last one, it also has 5 columns. So we have inconsistent field counts. The second file has only a single tab, and it has pretty much the same format as one of the tabs in the previous file. So to sum up, what's wrong with these files? Ultimately, the records themselves are correct, but it's just the inconsistent formatting that will pose issues when we are analyzing the data. In this particular scenario, we have multiple files, so we need to draw all the records from different connections. We also have multiple tabs for some of the files, but probably more problematic is we have inconsistent field names. So for example, you have park ID, you have another park ID with a space, and you also have another name, jogging trail ID, when they technically mean the same thing. We also have some inconsistent field counts. Some of them have 5 columns, but some of the tabs only have 4 columns. Now that we've described the scenario, let's start cleaning. Let's first take a look at Tableau Desktop. Okay, so let's make a connection to Parks and Facilities. Drag that over. Now remember that the Facilities tab, the first few rows are either merged or blank. So these are not data rows that should be included in our datasets. In this case, we can use the data interpreter. It will try to find the most common issues that exist in text files or Excel files or PDF files, and it's going to clean up majority of the issues. So let's use the data interpreter. Let's start with Facilities, drag that over. Let's just validate all the fields and make sure that the field names that we're expecting are the ones that we're seeing. Usually for unions that involve just a single file, we simply need to get the second table, and when we drag this over, we need to make sure that it's right underneath the existing table, and it will prompt us if we wanted to union. But in this case, because we have a second file, we can't use this type of union. So what we can do is we can convert this first table to a union first, so convert to union. And in the window that shows up, you can see that there are 2 tabs. You have specific and wildcard. And again, specific, it's manually dragging all of these tables or sheets that we want in that particular union. However, if you have another file, we have to use automatic. Now in the automatic tab, let's click on that. In the automatic tab, we can include or exclude certain sheets or include or exclude certain workbooks. We can also expand the search to subfolders or even parent folders. Now in terms of wildcard, really the wildcard we're talking about is just the asterisk. And the asterisk means any character. If it matches 0 or any characters, then it's going to pick up those files. In our case, we simply just want to pick up any Excel files. So in here, instead of parks and facilities, I'm going to remove that and I'm going to replace that with an asterisk. So any Excel file in this current folder will be picked up by our automatic union. Let's click on apply. Let's click OK. Remember, we have some issues where we have the same column, but they're named differently in different tabs or in different files. What we need to do is we need to combine them. We need to collapse them into a single column, and that's called merging. We can merge in different places in Tableau Desktop. First, we can merge from the metadata window. So in the metadata window, park ID, we have two park IDs, and we also have this jogging trail ID. If they're meant to be the same column, we can merge them. So I'm going to control click on a PC, and if you're using a Mac, you have to use command click. I'm going to select park ID, jogging trail ID, and park ID. Right click, and from here you're going to see an option called merge mismatched fields. So now it has merged all of those into a single field. Now we can rename this field. Let's call this ID. We can also merge from the preview window. So let's minimize the metadata window. So let's scroll down. Perhaps we want to merge name and jogging trail name. Again, selecting both of them using control click, and again in a Mac, it's a command click, right click, and then merge mismatched fields. And now we can rename. Now let's go to sheet 1. We can also merge mismatched fields from the worksheet view. So for example, we have count and facility count. Let's select both of those, right click. The only difference is you have to go to transform, and from here you can still see the same option called merge mismatched fields. And let's rename. Let's also move ID. It's not meant to be a measure, but it's meant to be a dimension. Now let's just display all the values because there's one last thing we need to do. Let's display facility type. Let's put in our ID as well as name. Now remember that the second tab in our Parks and Facilities Excel file, it's actually missing the facility type field. So we just need to reintroduce that. Make sure that all of these tables have the same 5 fields. There's a few ways we can do this, but we can probably just create another calculated field. So in here, create calculated field. Let's call this type. And in here, we can make certain assumptions. For now, we're going to simplify. We're going to say, if this is missing, if the facility type is missing, or if it's null, then we're simply going to replace this with the sheet name. If we drag the sheet name over, currently it's called jogging trails. So we're just going to rely on that. If you need to have a different value, then you just simply replace this second argument in the if null function. Minimize this, extend that, and drag sheet onto this. And let's click OK, and we're going to display the type instead. So we have jogging trails, ball hockey, and then quite a few more. Now, one last check. Let's create another worksheet just to validate that we are really getting from 2 different files. Let's display the path. This validates we're getting from 2 Excel files, and then under sheet, we are getting from 3 sheets in the first file, and then 1 tab or 1 sheet from the second Excel file. Now let's try to do the same thing using Tableau Prep Builder. We'll do this 2 different ways in Tableau Prep Builder. The first one is the union happens at the connection level. And the second way is we're going to use the clean steps and use a union operator. And we'll see the differences, and you might have a preference of how to do this in the future. So now that we are in Tableau Prep Builder, we can create a connection from our connection pane, or we can also choose to drag one of the files over. So this is the first way of creating this union. It's going to be based on the connection. So let me drag the Parks and Facilities Excel file. Now remember in here that the Facilities tab, if we drag that over, we are going to see that Tableau is not able to properly parse all of the field names. And this is because of the merged fields and the blank rows. So we're still going to be using our data interpreter in this case. So let's click on Data Interpreter. Now what we're also going to do is we're going to go to the Tables tab. In the Tables tab, there is an option to union multiple tables, and we're going to choose that. So after we select, we're going to see some additional options. In this case, it's going to be very similar to what we've seen in Tableau Desktop. So in here, we can include subfolders. We can also add our patterns. In this case, we can still decide whether it's a match or a non-match. We can also still add our wildcard, so star.excel file. Now, one difference with Tableau Prep Builder and Tableau Desktop, in here we can add additional file filters if we wanted to. This functionality is not available in Tableau Desktop. Now that we have changed our pattern, we can see that now it picks up two different files. You have the Parks and Facilities file and the Sports Fields files. And these are all the tabs that are going to be included. So let's click on Apply. And let's create a clean step. So in here, we can either click on the plus sign and add a clean step, or we can simply click on this icon that allows us to automatically create that clean step. Now, the same issue that we've had before, we do need to merge some fields. In this particular case, we know we have 3 different ID fields that we want to merge. So let's search for that, anything that has ID. So having the search bar actually makes things easier in Tableau Prep. In this case, we find all the ID fields and we can simply select all of these, right click, and then merge. Let's clear the search. Another way to merge the fields in here in this particular area is to go to the list view. So the list view only shows metadata or the field names. It makes it a little bit easier to find fields. So let's look for count. Select both of these and then merge. And the same thing for name. So let's just clear our search. And for our name, there's name right here and jogging trail name. So right click, merge. So let's go back to our profile view. And here we can preview our data. This is what our data looks like. So we can rearrange our fields if we wanted to. So move park ID first, and perhaps we want our facility type right beside it. Park ID, facility type. Let's move that up. There's the name, the facility count, and then it also includes the metadata fields, table names, and file paths. At any point in time, if you wanted to preview this in Tableau Desktop, you can right-click any of the steps and preview in Tableau Desktop. The final step is still to add the facility type column for the records related to our jogging trails. So in Tableau Prep Builder, let's just double check. Anything that has a null value for facility type, let's click on that. And let's maximize this. Let's minimize the connection pane. So we can see that where the facility type is null, so it's missing right here, it is actually coming from the sheet or the table name called jogging trails. So again, for our purposes, we're just going to create a calculated field. Let's deselect this. In the ellipses, I'm going to create a calculated field. Let's call this type. And we're simply going to use the same formula we used in Tableau Desktop. If null, facility type, then we're going to assign it our table name. Let's save. Let's take a look again. Maximize this. So this is our original field, and this is the calculated field. A second way to do this in Tableau Prep Builder is by using the union operator. Now, again, ultimately you get the same result. However, it gives you a slightly different cleaning experience. So in here, let's connect to both of these files, drag these over. Now in the sports field, we will see the odd looking field names, F2, F3, F4. So that usually means we have to use the data interpreter. So let's select the data interpreter. Let's add the additional tabs. Let's go to Parks and Facilities. And again, here, we're still going to use the data interpreter because if we take a look at our facilities, it's going to have the same characteristics. We have F1, F2, F3. So again, the odd looking field names. So use data interpreter. Let's maximize this a bit more. We're going to connect to community centers as well as jogging trails. In this way, though, we are going to use the union operator. So one way to add the union operator is clicking on the plus sign. And from here, you can see union. There is also a shortcut. You can simply get one of the inputs and then drag it over to another input or another result of a clean step. And it will prompt you what kind of operator you want. So let's do that instead. So in here, facilities, drag that over to sports fields. And I'm going to make sure that the highlighted portion is union. And we're going to do the same thing for the third one. In here, instead of union, we're going to add to the existing operator. So it's going to be this big bucket right here that says add. And then the fourth one, same thing, drag that over and then add. So why would you want to go this route? It feels like it's a lot more steps. And the reason may be it's a little bit clearer what you're cleaning up. When we go to the union operator, let's maximize this. You will see right away any of the mismatched fields. Also in your preview, you're going to see what portion is populated and which ones actually don't have any matches. It makes it clearer visually that some of the fields that maybe we're expecting to match, they're not matched. So to merge the fields, there is a third way if you are using the union operator. So for example, we want to keep this park ID. I can select that. And if I hover over a second field and I want to merge this field to the currently selected one, all I need to do is click on the plus sign, and that merges this field to the previous field. So whatever field you select, it retains that field name. So all of these are going to be park ID without the space. So let's click on jogging trail ID. Let's click on the plus sign. And we're also still going to select our park ID and select the second park ID that has a space. So the other ways of merging the fields, they're still valid. So for example, if I wanted to look for name and I wanted to merge these two, I can select name first if I wanted to keep that field name, and then select the second one, right click, and then merge fields. And as we clean and merge, you're also going to see that the list of fields that are marked as potentially mismatched, it decreases. Final one, we can go to the list view. Let's clear our search term. Again, notice in here it's very visual. Everything is color coded. It makes it easier to figure out which ones are still not matched. So let's select count and then facility count, right click, and merge fields. Let's go back to our profile pane. Let's create another clean step just so we can kind of see what the data looks like. And again, let's just rearrange. I'm going to go back to our list view. I'm going to rearrange. I'm going to have the park ID first, table names at the end. We have facility type, we have name, count, facility URL. And then let's go back to our profile pane. From here, we can verify that the records that are coming from the jogging trails, they don't have the facility type. And that's because that particular sheet only has 4 columns instead of 5. Now, we can technically derive the value from our table names because we don't have another metadata that is a sheet name. So in this particular case, we do need to split up this particular string. So let's scroll to the right. For our table names, click on the ellipses, split values. We're going to use a custom split. We are going to use a /, and we are simply going to get the last one string token. So we just want that sheet name. So last, and then split. We can now see jogging trails in here. Let's use this new field in our calculated field. So in the ellipses, create calculated field. Let's call this facility type. It's going to have the same formula as our previous example using Tableau Prep Builder. So it's just going to be an if null facility type, which is the original one. If this is missing, we are going to assign it this new value, which is coming from our table name. So this one by default was named table names split 1. So we're going to choose this, close the parentheses, and save. Scroll to the left. Let's take a look at all of those null values from our original field. And now we can confirm that the proper facility type is now assigned. Let's expand this. Now, if we wanted or needed to, we can now create an output. Now in Tableau Prep Builder, you can export the cleaned version of your records. And in here, we can save the output to a file. And as of the time of this recording, it supports a hyperfile, an Excel file, and a CSV file. Alternatively, you can export this to a published data source, to a database, or to CRM analytics. The final example is using Power Query. So in Excel, let's go to the Data tab. And from here, we're going to connect to the 2 Excel files. So let's get our data. So let's connect to the first file that has 3 tabs. So from File, from Excel Workbook, Parks and Facilities. Let's import. So we are going to connect to the 3 tabs right away. So we're going to select multiple items and select all 3. We are not going to load the data yet because we need to clean this up. So we're going to choose Transform Data. So Community Centers is okay. But when we go to Facilities, remember we have these issues. So in Power Query, we can remove the first few rows and then promote the header. So we want to promote row 3 because these are the field names. So let's go to Remove Rows, remove top rows. And in here, we're going to specify the 2 rows that need to be removed. And we also have an option to use first row as headers. Let's click on that. And just for consistency, we're going to make sure that all of the first field names are called Park ID. Let's go to jogging trails as well and make sure that's Park ID. Note here in Power Query that all of our changes are also logged. They are in the applied steps. This is similar to Tableau Prep. All of the changes are also logged on our changes pane. So now we're also going to connect to the second Excel file. Let's right click on our queries pane. We're going to create a brand new query in here to a file, again to an Excel file. sports fields, and let's import. We only have a single tab here, so we're going to select sports fields. Let's click on OK. Note in here, this is very similar to our facilities, so we're going to remove the first 2 rows, and we're also going to promote the 3rd row as column headers. So remove rows, remove top rows, first 2, and then use first row as headers. And again, we're just going to make it consistent. Park ID, we're going to double click and rename this so that it has a space before ID. Now we need to do a union. We can do this by using an append. So let's click on the drop down arrow right beside append queries. And we want this to be a different query, a different connection altogether. So we're going to append queries as new. We also have more than 2 tables, so we have to select the second option. So 3 or more tables. And in here, we're going to add community centers all the way to jogging trails. And let's add all 3 of them. And let's click OK. Let's call this all records. Now we're not quite done yet, because remember, we still have a few more columns that have different names that we need to merge. Let's minimize this. Let's close our query settings for now. So we can see in here, we have quite a few columns that have just nulls. In Power Query, we can also take a look at the column profiles. So if we go to the View tab in here, let's take a look at our column distribution, as well as our column quality. We can see that some of these, they have more than 98% nulls. If we wanted to, we can also just take a look at the column profile. So let's check that. And in here, for example, if we select jogging trail, again, we have all of the column statistics right here. Now to merge fields, so for example, park ID, control click, jogging trail ID. If we wanted to merge this, we have a couple of options. We can choose to transform. So under the transform tab, there's an option in here to merge columns. And what this does is it collapses one of the fields to the other one. A slightly similar option is when we go to the add column. With the add column, the difference is it will keep the original fields and it's going to create a brand new column. In our case, let's just go to transform, merge columns, and let's call this park ID. And let's click OK. Let's also merge name and jogging trail name. We can also merge the column by right-clicking, but making sure that we're still in the transform tab. So right-click, merge columns. Let's call this name. And the final field to merge will be facility count, as well as count. Right-click and then merge. Let's call this count. Now, because we used the same names that already existed, some of these have been given a name with a .1, so we just need to rename these as well. So double click, remove .1. Now remember that jogging trails have a null facility type. So let's take a look at that. On the drop down, we're going to select everything that is null. And again, we know from previous examples that these are our jogging trails. So in this case, we can simply replace the values. So in here, right click, replace values. So anything that is null, we're going to specify jogging trails. Let's click OK. Now, if we wanted to, we could have technically created another column with a formula that uses the same if null statement. So let's just go back to view our query settings again. Let's remove the final change that we just did. And let's add a new column, custom column. Let's call this one facility type with a space. And we can type in if facility type equals null, then let's specify jogging trails. Else, we want facility type. Note in here in Power Query, we don't have to specify the end clause. At this point, no syntax errors. Let's click OK. We have jogging trails. Let's try this one more way. So still under add column, we can also try conditional column. This will achieve the same thing, it's just a different way of getting there. Let's call this facility type 2. If the original facility type is null, then we are going to output jogging trails. Else, we're going to select our facility type. Let's click OK. And again, in here, 2 ways of doing the same thing. So let's remove this final field. We also want to remove the original facility type. So right click, remove. Final step, we just need to make sure that we don't have any filters. So let us undo this step called filtered rows. Let's just make sure our data still looks okay. So we have the different facility types and we should still have our jogging trails. So let's double check. Here we still have our jogging trails. So now let's click on close and load, but we have to click on the drop down. So we're going to choose close and load to, not close and load, because by default close and load, it will create tables for all of the queries that we have. We simply want a connection first and then choose one of these connections to be in the Excel file. So drop down, close and load to. We're simply going to create a connection right now. So instead of table, only create a connection and click OK. Once we are in Excel, we can choose the connection that we want to load to a specific worksheet. So in this case, let's right-click on all records, load to, and instead of only create connection, we're going to switch our choice. It's going to be table now. So in here, table, click OK, and this should be our clean data. And that's it for this video. So hopefully you found this helpful. Again, we cleaned the data 3 times, but using 3 different tools and slightly different ways. It's always good to know that different tools can do the same type of cleaning, and it's also good to know how functionalities translate in different tools. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you again next time.